Let's talk about college. In America, it sucks. College in general doesn't suck, but the application process sucks. How did I get into college? Because I did get into college. I went through the process last year. I am a college freshman. Are you kidding me? So I went through the process about as recently as somebody could. I am a college freshman. I sent in my applications earlier this year, about 1 year ago exactly. So I know how horrible the process is. But I did the whole process myself. My parents were not involved. I didn't really talk to any college career counselors. It was really all me. And that is beneficial, and it also probably hurt a little bit, but either way, I think I'm credible to talk about this because I am going to college with a good scholarship. I go to Drexel University in Philadelphia, if that's relevant, but it's not really to this. But yeah, I go to, it's a pretty good school. If you are from the East Coast, then you probably know it's okay. I'm actually from the West Coast, so whenever somebody asks me, oh, what college do you go to? I'm like, Drexel? And then they really have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's okay. Let's talk about how you could get into a pretty good school with a pretty good scholarship. So just some background on myself so that this is relevant. I come from a school that had a lot of APs and was very academically focused and had a lot of really good extracurriculars. So obviously if your school doesn't have the same opportunities, I still think that colleges will take into consideration the school that you're from. Like even though I had a 4.3 GPA, that I was still in the bottom of the 10% of my school. So that just gives you reference, like my school is a little intense. Senior year I took 5 APs, and that was just senior year. I ended up taking 11 APs throughout my entire high school academic career. I passed all of them. I never got anything lower than 3. So that was pretty good. But obviously don't hold yourself to that. Like don't be stressing if you didn't take 11 APs because that's really not necessary. People in my major at my school, and my major is a hard major to get into at my school, but they got away with like a few APs, like a handful of APs. And APs are only somewhat important, especially if they're relevant to what you're actually studying. Like I, for example, am majoring in video game design and production. So that's weird. But I took like AP Comp Sci and AP Studio Art. So, you know. And speaking of art, that was like my extracurricular of choice. That was like my extracurricular of choice. Like my school had a really good art program, so, and I was president, so that was something to add to the resume, and I did a lot of other stuff outside of school that was related to art, so that helped too. But I think that as long as you have at least like one extracurricular that you're really set in, that you're like good at, and that you can maybe reach an officer position in, that's like good enough for most schools. They don't care if you're like in 3 different things. You don't have to be in sports, in art, in Model UN. You don't have to be in everything. Of course, if you are, that helps. But I'm saying for like, if you want to get into like a mid-level, not so famous college, that's good. And I think that's the key actually to getting a lot of good scholarship money is don't go to a famous school. Like don't expect that if you're in like 4 APs and you have a 4.0 GPA that you're automatically going to get into Harvard with full scholarship. Like, no. I know people who got into Harvard and they didn't get much money at all, even though they were really good, like academically and extracurricular wise. Like I think the biggest key to success, like sure you can apply to those famous schools, but if you apply to a school you've never heard of, chances are you're gonna get in and they're gonna give you good money. Like Drexel's a school that I had never heard of being from the West Coast. They gave me good money. Then again, if I were on the East Coast, I probably would have known the school, so that makes this rule kind of relevant. But I think schools like to take kids from out of state who wouldn't typically apply to the school. That makes you a more appealing applicant, I think. It helps that I'm minority. Like, I'm a girl who is Hispanic, who is going into a computer science major. Even though my major is really more art, it was still like good. It was good for them to have another minority to add to the list. Even though my school is very diverse. But I'm saying being a minority doesn't hurt. Especially if you're applying to regional schools that don't maybe get as many of whatever kind of minority you are. Southern schools, especially schools in the south of the US, are really good about that. Everybody likes to have a diverse school. It's nice for their pamphlets. And that's like a pretty crappy thing to talk about. Like, affirmative action isn't something that is conceptually legal here in the US, but it still happens. So I would still play up to your strengths. However, if you're white, you can still obviously get into a lot of schools the same way. Just look for schools that you don't know. Like, do your research and look into schools that have good programs for your major, not schools that you just automatically think of. Now, of course, if you want to get into the school like next to wherever you're from, like in your hometown, that's like another thing. But I think it's better personally to like branch out. I didn't want to stay where I was from, and so I moved across the country. But you don't have to necessarily do that to find a school that will accept you with a good scholarship. Like, I got into another school, a UC in California where I'm from, and it actually would have cost about the same to go to the school that I'm going to now. And in fact, the school I'm going to now, because of expenses of being an out-of-state student, is more expensive. But I think it's worth it personally because it's like part of the college experience is exploring, you know? So I would say if you have the opportunity, definitely go out of state or maybe even out of country if you can afford it. But if not, still look for a school nearby that isn't really as well known as one of the big universities in this country. And you're pretty much guaranteed entry.
Can you play a game with me?
Later. If your dream school has always been like a big name university, like an Ivy League, and you are number one in your class, that's still not a guarantee that you're gonna get money. And I think money is a big thing here in America now when it comes to college applicants. And that's a reason why most people go to most of the schools they go to nowadays, is that college is so expensive in the US that money is the deciding factor. So that's why I'm saying to apply to a school you've never heard of. Not, Lucas, apply to a school you've never heard of, not because it's necessarily number one in the nation for your program, but because smaller schools are so much more likely to give you money. Like, Lucas, your college essay is also like a big part of it, supposedly. But I wrote mine about running a meme account on Instagram. So something tells me it's maybe not the biggest thing on your application, but obviously it's still important. I would recommend writing about something that's like actually unique. Like, I could have talked about being in my art program, I could have talked about my family, but all of those things have been done before, you know? I think it's best if you write something that is actually really special about you. Even if it's something small, like running a meme account on Instagram, that's still better than doing whatever somebody has done 1,000 times before. Whatever ways that you can distinguish yourself on your application is obviously going to be really helpful, but the numbers do count. SAT, ACT, APs, IBs, they all count. But there's only so much you can do about that at this point, you know. By the time you're applying for colleges, it's kind of already like too late. But don't dread about it, you know. There's plenty of schools where the numbers like that are really secondary to the person. It just depends on the school. If you apply to enough schools, you're gonna get in somewhere, and I'm of the personal belief that you are gonna end up where you belong, no matter what you put on your application. I applied to a lot of schools that I didn't really have an interest in. I just liked the name. And I didn't get into any of them. I didn't get into any of the big name schools that I applied to. But I'm glad, you know? It just, I don't see myself at any other place than where I am. I think that no matter where you apply to, you're gonna end up where you belong. And that's probably hard for a lot of people to grasp because they, nowadays especially, don't really get into the bigger schools that they know about and have dreamed about ever since they were a child. They get into somewhere that they didn't even realize was a viable option. And they end up going and they have the time of their life, you know? Because no matter where you are, college is such a wonderful time, generally. Like, there's always people who are not going to enjoy something, but if you make it, college can be the most fun of your whole life. It's just important that you end up somewhere that'll make you happy. And for me, that was somewhere not at home, somewhere in a city, and somewhere with a lot of people, a lot of interesting people. And that's exactly where I am, and that's why I'm happy. So if you are happiest on a quiet, peaceful ranch in the middle of Alabama, you apply there. Another factor that really goes into college application are parents. If it were up to me, I would ban parents from being part of the process altogether, because I think it's your education and it's your life and it's your future that you are planning out. And I just don't think that parents should really have too much of a say. Like, obviously, if they're paying for it, then you might feel obligated to like ask their opinion on some things, but in terms of the actual application, it's not your parents who are applying, it's you. So I think that the student should have the most power and should be in charge of presenting all the information about themselves from their own perspective and with their own knowledge and experience. I think that's really important to showing who you are. I don't really know anybody whose parents fill out their information, but I'm sure it happens. And I'm sure a lot of people run everything by their parents, but I don't really think that that's beneficial to either party. I think that college, as much as it is about an education, like a scholastic education and maybe even a social education and being around other people, it's just as much a lesson on independence and becoming an adult. At least if you're going in straight out of high school. Like, there's plenty of people who go to college who are already adults. But I'm saying if you're applying to go straight from high school to college or university, whenever I say college, I mean university. Or community college, I don't know, you do you. But I think a lot of it should be about you, because you're going there just as much to better yourself and not to be continually dependent on your parents. Like, I know people in college who, up until going to college, had their parents pick out their clothes. I was like, and like do all the laundry and do everything. And as much as I'm shocked by that, at the same time, it's good that now they're at the college and they have to do it by themselves. So it's just part of the experience. So I think the same should be true of filling out your own FAFSA, filling out your own CSS profile, filling out everything really by yourself. And that might be a lot of pressure, but that's just being an adult. It sounds crazy and harsh and scary now that I'm saying it, but like, that's what I did, and that's what so many other people do, and that's the most beneficial way to get it done. In terms of what you can do on your application to really make yourself shine, like I said, just don't just be yourself, because there's so many parts of you that are just another part of your community or your social settings where you grew up in. But like, pick the things about you that are different than everyone around you, because those are the real bits that they want, you know? They don't want what everybody has. If your specific community is really abnormal with reference to like the greater United States culture, then obviously that is something you could talk about. Like, if you live in a family with 17 siblings, yeah, that's weird. And you should distinguish in that what makes you the special sibling. Even if you're maybe not, just like, talk about it. Colleges will be able to tell if you put a lot of heart into whatever you're applying with. So, do your best. Don't get too caught up on the numbers. If you've tried your hardest on the SAT and ACT and your max is like slightly above average or average, don't sweat it too much. Some schools, like art schools, don't even care about those kind of numbers. They care about a portfolio. But if you're not applying to art school and you're just applying to like whatever other kind of school people apply to, at some point it's just beyond numbers. And worst case, if you don't get into anywhere that has a viably good program, there's so many options to get education nowadays. Like community college, just go to community college and then transfer. That's a really great option and it's often cheaper. But if you want to go straight to university, then your best bet is going to be small. Or not small, but obscure. Obscure is the key word for a college that's really going to benefit you. And I keep reiterating it because I don't think people realize it. Like, I keep repeating, go to a school that you wouldn't think of. Because those are the schools that are going to be the most advantageous. College. I love America.
It's a fun game.
Okay, later. I'll come find you later.
Please.
Okay, close the door. When I'm done, I'll find
Were
you.
you done? What are you? Wait, are you making a video?
Yeah.